Right, good. Well, I believe that as I share this morning, it's going to generate more faith, and we may well end up, we'll see how the Spirit leads, praying for one another at the end as well, because I believe God's going to work in our lives. Because we're going to look today at Jesus saying in John 8, "I am the light of the world." And we're following this series of looking at the sayings of Jesus in John's Gospel, and last week Pete spoke to us about Jesus saying, "I am the bread of life." So today I'm doing "I am the light of the world." And light is a very meaningful symbol. And you can look up many quotes from famous people about light. For instance, this one from Martin Luther King, where the American civil rights leader, who said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." That's not from the Bible, but it's certainly based on biblical principles, and it's very powerful. But what light is actually quite difficult to describe and state. Light is here, and it's there, and we know when it's here, and we know when it's not. But what actually is it is quite difficult to define. Scientists will tell you it's an electromagnetic wave, and it's a particle, or it's a wave, or it's a wave that acts like a particle, or a particle that acts like a wave. They don't really know either. It's quite difficult to pin down. We know some things about it. We see its effects. We know it has a speed. It travels in straight lines. It can be split into glorious different colours like a rainbow. But what is it? It's not quite so easy to say and pin down. If we think of life, not light, life itself, we'd probably agree that light is essential to life. Without light, there would not be, and would probably never have been, life itself. And in fact, the very first words that we have recorded of God speaking, what did God say? "Let there be light." And there was light, and it was very good. It's a good thing. And that's the very first words of God in Genesis chapter 1. In fact, I think we can go a little bit further and say 3 things are essential to life for all living things. Number 1 is light. Number 2 is water. And number 3 is food or energy of some sort. Scientists might want to add some detail into that and talk about, amino acids and certain gases and things like that. But basically, it's light, water, and food or energy. It boils down to those 3 things. And what does Jesus talk about in John's Gospel? Well, he talks about giving living water and knowing rivers of living water flowing from our hearts. He talks about he is the bread of life, the food of life. And in chapter 8 that we're going to read today, he talks about "I am the light of the world," the 3 essentials of living. It's amazing that Jesus uses these 3 elements, food, water and light, to show us that he is all we need. Absolutely necessary for life is Jesus. Completely sufficient for life is Jesus. Fully satisfying for life is Jesus. Amen? Jesus, necessary, sufficient, and satisfying. That is what our life as believers can know and be if we trust in Jesus. If we allow that truth to settle in our hearts and minds, we can know that in our hearts and minds as well. And we're going to read now from John's Gospel, chapter 8, and I'm going to read from verses 12 to 30. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The Pharisees challenged him. "Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid." And Jesus answered, "Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I am going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are right, because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law it is written that the testimony of two men is valid. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me. Then they asked him, Where is your Father? You do not know me or my Father, Jesus replied. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while teaching in the temple area near the place where the offerings were put. Yet no one seized him because his time had not yet come. Once more Jesus said to them, I am going away, and you will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come. This made the Jews ask, Will he kill himself? Is that why he says, Where I go, you cannot come? But he continued, You are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. I told you that you would die in your sins if you do not believe that I am the one I claim to be. You will indeed die in your sins. Who are you? They asked. Just what I have been claiming all along, Jesus replied. I have much to say in judgment of you, but he who sent me is reliable, and what I have heard from him I tell the world. They did not understand that he was telling them about his Father. So Jesus said, When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am the one I claim to be, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. Even as he spoke, many put their faith in him. Amen. Lord, I pray that we will put our faith in you more today as we listen to your word. Amen. So in this passage that we've just read, Jesus is at the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths as it's sometimes called, that was taking place in Jerusalem. In fact, it's coming to the end of the feast. That was a great celebration. It was a great feast, and it's when the Jews remembered their deliverance from Egypt and the journey they went on to the Promised Land. It's a bit like a harvest festival time, in fact, and it was the promise of hope. It was the promise of future deliverance. There were processions and marches, not probably quite as enormous as the one we had yesterday, but nevertheless there were processions and marches of priests who were wearing palm branches and pouring oil and sprinkling oil and water on people as they walked past. It was carnival time, really. And as part of the festival, part of the celebrations, on the first day of the feast, 4 golden lampstands were lit along the route. And there would be much rejoicing and celebrations as people passed these lampstands, and the light could be seen across the entire city. And at the end of the feast, the lights were extinguished and they were put out for another whole year. You imagine this scene of celebration and festivities, and then it comes to an end, the lights go out, as it were. And it's at that point that Jesus stands up, probably right near where those very lamps had been shining, but were now dark, and says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I mean, he knew how to make a statement. He knew just the right time. It's a bit of theatre, really, that he's engaging in. He's making his point. It's a powerful statement. Jesus says he is the light of the world. And as we've said, it's a powerful symbol. We've already seen how at the very beginning God said, let there be light. And as the Jews were remembering in this festival, in that story of Exodus, as they journeyed, it was a pillar of fire or light that led the people at night through the wilderness to the Promised Land. And the psalmist says in Psalm 27 verse 1, the Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? And later in Psalm 119, that famous verse we'll pick up a bit later on this morning, in Psalm 119, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And Isaiah, in chapter 49, he prophesied about the servant of the Lord who would be a light for the nations and my salvation to reach to the end of the earth. And then in Isaiah 60 and Revelation 21, it talks about how God will be your everlasting light, and how the glory of God gives light to the new city of God. This idea of Jesus being the light of the world is very powerful. And I want to just bring three things out from this statement today. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And the first thing is the contrast between light and darkness. One of the key points that Jesus is making is between light and darkness. Between Jesus being the light of the world and walking in darkness and dying in your sin, which is the alternative to trusting in Jesus. When we don't get this feeling so much here in England, but when we lived in Tajikistan, because it was very much poorer country with almost no electricity at times, if you walked out at night, it was pitch black. There was no light pollution. It was completely black. And if you wanted to walk, you needed a torch or something. Otherwise, you could not find your way. We don't experience that very much in this country at all. But there was complete darkness. Or, on occasions, if you went out at night, and if there were no clouds, and it was a full moon, it was amazingly bright. So bright it seemed like day. You could read a book by the light of the moon, and you certainly didn't need your torch. Even the light of the moon, which is not a strong light, was strong enough to dispel the darkness completely. And light and darkness is like that. No matter how many experiments you perform, you will never find darkness defeating light. If you flick a light switch on in a room, the darkness disappears. Apparently, a candle on a hilltop, if there's no other light around, no light pollution, nothing in the way, a candle on a hilltop can be seen for 43 miles. Wow. That's incredible. No wonder ARP wardens in the Second World War were neurotic about chinks of light behind the blackout curtains. If you know those stories, everybody was supposed to blacken out their windows so that the light didn't shine through and give a signal to the German bombers who were coming over. And ARP wardens would go around checking that there were no chinks of light because they knew light was powerful. It was important. In a very real sense, light is invincible. Yeah. That's why in many cultures and customs and films and legends and fairy tales and stories, light is a symbol that's used to tell the stories. Star Wars, the dark side of the Force, and the light lasers, and all those sort of things, and the Hindu Diwali festival of light, or the Egyptians worshipping the sun, or our own Christmas lights. We use light as a symbol because it's powerful. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And he's clearly declaring he is invincible because he is the light of the world. Light will always win. And Jesus' teaching here, he's teaching about contrasts, not only between light and darkness, but between life and death. He mentions death several times here. You will die in your sins if you do not know me as the light of the world. He talks about between truth and lies. Knowing the truth, which will set you free, or believing the lies. And Jesus comes and says, I'm the light of the world, it's me, the invincible one. I've come to you bringing you real life, genuine truth, true godliness, a genuine grace and forgiveness. And for those who will follow, that's invincible. The darkness of sin and death and lies and pride and hypocrisy will be overcome in you and me as we let and allow the light of God, Jesus, to work in us. There's not a dark corner where Jesus, the light, cannot and does not reach. And where Jesus as light cannot work and set us free. Jesus, the light of the world, brings a wonderful setting free to live the full, abundant life that God has for us. Many have shared their stories of coming to faith in Christ. It's been like a light going on, or like moving from black and white world to one of colour. You hear that sort of story. That was my testimony too when I was 17. My life quite suddenly became, as I accepted Jesus, became clearer, became with purpose. I knew God's love shining in my life. And others noticed, some of my school friends noticed. I'd gone away on a school camp, and when I came back, I'd found faith in Jesus. Well, Jesus had found me, really, but I'd been seeking, and he found me. And I came back, and I was just beaming from ear to ear. And one of my friends said to me, "What's happened to you? Are you in love? Have you found a girlfriend?" I hadn't. But I said to him, no, but I know God loves me now. I know Jesus loves me. It changed my life. It put me on a new course with a new purpose. Things became clearer in my life because the light of Jesus had come into my life. And as Jesus talks about having the light of life and being the light as opposed to walking in darkness, it just highlights to us that if you want real life, which cannot be overcome even by death, life in all its fullness, then the light of the world, Jesus, is what you need. You need the light of Jesus. And once the light and life of God has broken in on someone's life, in you and in me, then there's nothing that Satan himself or any other power can do to reinstate that reign of death and darkness. Light is invincible. Jesus in you is greater than he that is in the world, which we'll come to in a minute. Jesus is the light of the world. And that's the second point that we can learn from this. He is the light of the world. Just as John said, God so loved the world, so Jesus said, I am the light of Jerusalem, Israel, his disciples. No, the world. The world. And the world's a big place, especially if you think of history as well. It's because the light of God, Jesus, is so powerful, so invincible, that what started as a group of about 120 believers, largely uneducated, in a small middle-class eastern country. They never left any books. They didn't do any YouTube videos. They weren't on TikTok or social media. Nothing like that. And yet, that faith spread across the entire world, right down through the ages, through history, growing and spreading, and even thriving when suppressed as well. That's the light of God. Think of all that we saw yesterday. I know it was full of trappings and pomp and ceremony, not all of which is really central to the Christian faith at all. I know that. But nevertheless, what was there was a result of what happened more than 2,000 years ago with Jesus. See how much it has spread. This is the light of God, Jesus, for the world. Now, of course, having said that, Jesus then uncomfortably says, and you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill, some translations say a city built on a hill, cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Our calling is to be a light to the ends of the earth, starting where we are now. Do you want a purpose in life? Do you want to know that your life counts for something? Do you want to achieve something for God? Well, if you follow Jesus, the light of the world, then you have the light of light, and you can let that shine, and you have a purpose, and darkness will not overcome the light. As I said, he that is in you, the light of the world, is greater than he that is in the world, said John later in one of his letters. He that is in you is greater than he that is in the world. And the light of Jesus can shine in you and in your family. When you're at work, when you're out shopping, when you're in hospital, when you're together with friends. We can be like a town or a hill on a hill together, being a light to the world. This is why it's part of our mission as a church, our calling as a church, to impact not just our local area, but the world. We're called to be a light of the world, to the world, which, as I said, it's a big place. And our calling includes partnering and supporting and praying for and helping and doing mission with others around the world. That's part of our calling. Edenbridge is actually not enough for this church because we're called to the nations. We're called to the ends of the earth. In fact, that's why we partner with Regions Beyond. That's why it's good to get together at the end of August if we can and meet other churches and see what they're doing and hear what they're doing. Because we've got brothers and sisters all over the world who are on mission together with us. And we need to be reminded of that and excited by that. For us, even us here in Edenbridge, in the past we've had links with China, with Tajikistan, with Burundi, with South Africa, with Salvation Army work with refugees in Athens, and many others. And we still have those sort of links. Sue and I, 2 weeks' time, just under 2 weeks' time, we're going out to America. We are going on holiday. But I'm also doing a wedding for a young man from Tajikistan who was here with us as an intern. Some of you will know him and remember him. And he was the son of the pastor and his wife who we were church planting with in Tajikistan. So we've still got that link. And his mum and dad, his father and mother will be there in America as well. So we'll be able to catch up with what's going on in Tajikistan. We're still involved with those sort of things. Jesus is the light of the world. And as followers, we are also the light of the world and have a part to play, which is exciting and challenging. We can pray, we can give, we can support, we can go, we can get involved in all these things. So, thirdly, there's light and darkness, there's light for the world, and then there's light to follow. That's the third point that Jesus is making in this short and powerful statement. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We're called to follow the light. That shouldn't be too difficult, should it? There's the light, we follow it. Not just to know about it, not just to learn the verse off by heart, not just to agree with it mentally, but to follow Jesus. That famous verse in the Psalms that we read earlier, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. That implies movement and walking, doesn't it? It's no good having feet if you don't use them. It's no good having a path if no one goes along it. That's what following Jesus is about. So how do we follow Jesus? How do we follow Jesus? Well, here it seems to mean a very literal following by learning to be more and more like Jesus. Walking like Jesus, talking like Jesus, and doing like Jesus. That's pretty basic, isn't it? Walking, talking, and doing like Jesus. How did Jesus walk? Well, he walked without sin. He resisted temptation. He walked as a servant, not as a proud leader, as we were thinking about at the start of our meeting. Not as a proud leader. He walked honestly, not deceiving or lying, but truthfully, even if it meant getting into trouble. That's how he walked. How did Jesus talk? Well, he talked with kindness, not judging others. He spoke the truth, not lies. He forgave people, not holding grudges, not getting bitter. That's how he talked. How did Jesus do? Well, he did the things he saw his Father doing. The miracles, the signs, the helping people, the caring, the forgiving, the rescuing, the healing. They were all things that he sensed his Father was doing, so he did them. And we're called to follow him as the light of the world. Let me challenge us all. How are we, how are you, how am I, how are we doing with following Jesus? How is your walk? How is your talk? How is your doing? Just as we come to an end, there's another eternal truth that we need to remember. Pete showed us how, in last week and the week before, how God revealed himself to Moses by giving his own name, saying, my name is I am. I am who I am, who I am. That's basically what God was saying. And in these chapters in John's Gospel, Jesus is taking that to himself, using the same phrase. He's saying, I am, meaning I am God, who is the light of the world. I am God, who is the light of the world, is what Jesus is saying. And in verse 58 of this chapter, as he's discussing with the Pharisees and leaders, he says, before Abraham was born, I am. Now, just to be clear, for everybody. Abraham was born centuries earlier than Jesus. A long, long time ago. And Jesus says, before Abraham was born, I am. Well, what's that saying? Has Jesus got his grammar wrong? Doesn't he know good English or Hebrew as it was in those days? No, he's saying, I existed before because I'm God. Before Abraham was born, I am God. I always am God. I always will be God. I was God. I am God. You can't put it into a time frame. I am God. And the Jews knew that full well, which is why they started to pick up stones to try to stone him, because they realized he was saying he was God. And it's only because Jesus is God that he can then claim to be the light of the world. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. How can you stand up and say, well, I'm the light of the world? Who would dare to say that? It doesn't make any sense unless you're God. Unless you are God. If you are God, then you have the right to say, I am the light of the world. So as we just come and respond, we can believe and put our trust in Jesus. Don't reject the light of the world, like many of those people did in that time. But receive Jesus. Put your faith in Jesus. Let me just pray about that first of all. Maybe you're here, you've got a faith, or maybe you had a faith, but it just seems to have gone dry. You just need and want to put your trust back into Jesus again. You can say to him right now, Jesus, I believe in you. I place my trust in you. Please forgive me. Thank you for dying in my place. Come into my life and make my life new. Amen. I just pray for anyone who's said that you will now fill them with your Holy Spirit, touch their lives afresh. Lord, we ask in your name. If you've said that just then come and see me or someone else who you came with and just tell them, or we can perhaps pray with you and encourage you. But for the rest of us, we are the light of the world, God's town or city. But it's part of God's plan for the world to allow the light to conquer the darkness around us. And guess what? You can't be a city on your own. That's called being abandoned on a desert island. We're a city together. We're a town together. That's how we can reach the world and be the light of the world. We follow Jesus as the light of the world. We follow his walk. We follow his talk. We follow his doing. How are we doing following Jesus? How are we doing together following Jesus? Let's shine for Jesus, shall we? Let's pray.